Sitting here with Scott Anderson, who is Professor Emeritus at Idaho State University, current Artistic Director of the ISU Alumni Chamber Choir. Upcoming concert June 13th at 7:30 p.m. at the Jensen Performing Arts Center, or Stevens Performing Arts Center, Jensen Concert Hall, excuse me. So tell us a little bit about this concert, what we have planned, and maybe just some of the bird's eye view planning for this event.
Well, I think that this concert is very representative of the kind of sort of tour through both historical and sound styles that the ISU Chamber Choir was always trying to pursue. So that means variety of composers, it means variety of styles, it means variety of eras. For instance, our first two pieces, one was written in the late 1580s, and we followed that with the next piece on the program. It was written in 2012. So there's the widest possible span between some of the literature we'll perform. There's genres that should appeal to the widest possible audience. Things that are rhythmically engaging and very busy, and some things that are very lyric and tuneful, like the pieces by Johannes Brahms. And we end with a spiritual, which tends to be a favorite of most people that attend these concerts. So variety is the main thing that I would say.
Let's just go through quick the program and what we have planned. The first one is Tomás Luis de Victoria, Regina caeli, laetare. I should probably brush that up a little bit, but so a little bit about this piece. I mean, we've talked about some of the imagery with this piece and being in some of the spaces of Europe to perform, and that kind of being a representative piece of an era. What do you have to say specifically about this piece?
Well, it is so representative of an era, and if people think about the era of Elizabeth I, the first Queen of England with the name Elizabeth, and her war with Phillip II of Spain, that's exactly the era that this piece by Victoria. And Victoria was one of the court composers for Philip II of Spain. And Spain was a Catholic nation, and this music is considered to be some of the most mystical of any of the Renaissance composers of that era. And mysticism is sort of like what was practiced in the cathedrals and churches of Spain, and that is lots of incense and opaque colors, unlike Britain, not the kind of stained glass that people think of with incredible colors, but maybe just openings with duller glass, and the smoke from the incense and the heavy tapestries and things like that would make the inner space, the inner sanctum, very mysterious. And so this music would seep through these huge cathedrals, and essentially what the people believed would evoke the Spirit of God, and that they would, through this music, have that experience. They would have their moment with the divine. It also is from an era where the human voice was kind of it was supreme in terms of what people would go to church to hear. And it was maybe the height of, I wouldn't say technology, but two choirs of 4 parts each singing at the same time would have seemed almost magical, like a miracle even in and of itself. It just didn't exist in other secular forms. There weren't 8 parts being sung at the same time in the villages and so on. So yeah, that's really
Yeah.
It's magical in that way.
So the next piece, Lux Aeterna, Ivo Antognini. You mentioned this one was composed much, much later, 2012, a very recent composition. Why would you say? I mean, it's juxtaposed to the Vittoria piece. What similarities do they share? How are they different? And what are we going for there?
Yeah, it's really an amazing similarities and amazing differences, both. First of all, Antognini is still alive. He's a Swiss composer, and he speaks Italian as his main language. And he wrote the piece in Latin, which is the same liturgical language that Vittoria wrote his piece in, 600 years before. So Antognini, though, by trade, is a jazz pianist. And so the language of some of the chords, as we kind of learned, there's compound chords where one section might be singing a G major chord at the same time that another section is singing a B major chord. And so essentially it's like a jazz pianist would, those kind of chords that a jazz pianist would play and a jazz trio. And so it's new language in the style, in imitation of, in honor of, really, people like Vittoria. Because it has the same effect. It's a cappella in the same language, but the stuff that it's made of, it's like, oh, I'm having a different meal today. I'm using the same china or whatever, but it's a completely different meal. And so the sounds will make people go, wow, that seems somewhat vaguely familiar, but there's also a lot of similarities to the piece I just heard.
Well, and I was struck singing this tonight for the first time in Jensen Hall, just really able to bathe in that sound and just how wonderful it is. I mean, I knew that going into it, but you experience it on a different level when you get to sing it in a concert hall like this. So.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really important point, and that is the first three pieces we're singing in this program are really dependent on a fine acoustic. They would be beautiful in any space, but the secret sauce or the secret to listening to these is reverberation. And like in the Antognini, all of those extensions of harmony, they don't just create a chord itself. They ring overtones that are not part of the chord or that are maybe an octave higher or lower than the actual pitches we're singing, just because of the overtone series. So there's a whole language that would be missing, a sort of color that would be missing if we weren't singing this in Jensen Hall. And it's a privilege to be in a hall like this in Pocatello, Idaho.
Certainly. Yeah. Okay, so the third piece, Jubilate Deo, again, a complete contrast from the previous piece. This is a fairly new composer, and I'm not gonna be able to say his name right. Motshwane Pege?
Yeah,
Maybe. Is that pretty good?
Motshwane Pege.
Okay. Tell me
Right.
about this piece.
Well, he, the composer, is South African, and what I mean is indigenous South African, and he is a person who was educated both in South Africa and the schools there, and then in Britain, and then also in the United States. So he's done other studies in other places, and he's well traveled. His music for his age, I think he's only in his 20s. And so I, in fact, heard this piece and saw it being performed on YouTube. And it was composed in 2025, literally last spring, the spring of 2025. And then the following spring, the spring of 2026, it was premiered. And what I heard was the premiere performance that was made at a competition. And at that competition, this piece won first prize. And this is a very well-known competition in Europe. And so it wasn't, oh, he won first prize in his hometown. No, this was a European competition of the highest rank. And so I actually contacted the composer via Messenger.
Okay.
And he responded immediately. And I said, I don't know how to get a hold of your music, and so on and so forth. So he said he would send me a PDF, and I paid for it that way. So that's some of the background of how we got the music. And so it is literally a piece of music that was just written, and it is as contemporary as can be. What makes it unique in our program is that it is a 21st century piece, imitating, it is also in Latin, so it's imitating that Renaissance style, but it's using almost entirely 21st century material, musical material. It's got polyrhythms, it has rhythmic ostinato, there's a 7/8 pattern that goes throughout the entire piece. And then there are places in the music where maybe 4 or 5 of the 8 parts singing are singing different rhythmic patterns at the same time on the same text, which makes it even more difficult because it's one thing to have your own rhythm on your own text, but it's quite confusing to learn just snippets of text on multiple rhythmic patterns at the same time. So that's one of its amazing qualities. Endless rhythmic variation, rhythmic drive. It's so exciting because of that. It develops this rhythmic ostinato, which is a repeating pattern that repeats over and over and over again, really till the end of the piece. And because of that pattern, it's almost like every succeeding phrase builds more energy and more anticipation. And then the composer's creativity is such that he adds things like having the singer stomp and clap. So there's body percussion. So while you all are singing this, you have to act as the percussionists as well.
Well, I remember when we first listened to this piece at our initial gathering. My job, I hit the floor. I was thinking, I don't know how I'm going to be able to learn this. I thought for sure this was going to be the most difficult, and to me, it's turned out to be much, much easier than I anticipated because it is so singable. It just I don't want to say it's easy. That's a bit too far, but it has come across as being much more doable than I had first imagined, and it just such a fun piece to perform.
Well, what's interesting is because it's so new, our performance will be the North American premiere.
That's wonderful. Of
the piece. So, and it really may be an entire hemispheric premiere, but I can't be sure about South America.
Sure.
But I know for a fact through the composer that we will be the first American choir, and that he says there hasn't been a Canadian choir yet that has
Okay.
has acquired the music.
Ah, wonderful. That'll be so much. That's icing on the cake to me, because it's such a wonderful piece anyway. But then to get the idea of a North American premiere is even better. Okay, so that's the first third of our concert. The second third is a complete work, Opus 103 by Brahms, Zigeunerlieder. A tour de force, in fact, on its own. What can you tell me about this work?
Well, how much time do you have?
Exactly.
It is, Brahms, just speaking about this composer, as a singer, as a choral person, Brahms' music is so rich and so rewarding because he writes so well for the voice, I think. And he writes for the voice in such a way that it can be used to its full color potential. And it's expressive, it's dramatic, it's covers all the emotions, from the most tender love song to the most pathetic state of human emotion, yearning, absolute joy, and euphoria, and then just kind of observation. I mean, Brahms's music, I just think, covers the whole human palette and the human emotions. But musically, this set is a set of 11 different movements, little pieces that are each a little vignette of their own, and the theme is gypsy. They're called gypsy songs. And so it's about both the life of being a gypsy and, most importantly, about one male gypsy's sojourn through love's greatest rewards and love's greatest disappointments. And Brahms takes us on this journey. And it isn't a song cycle in terms of telling a story about something from A to B to C to D, and then happy ending or a sad ending or whatever. But it's kind of general topics. And what does it feel like to have this puppy love? What does it feel like to be proud of yourself in a context of, I've just found someone that I adore and she adores me, and what's it like to essentially share that love with somebody, and then to have it become perhaps mature love. And if not, one party decides that they're not in love anymore, or not as much as the other person, and then that person is devastated. Yeah. And that's the story. It's just a story of love and
so well captured in the music.
Yeah.
I mean, in the harmonic texture, and it's
well,
definitely
and
all there.
I started down this road and got carried away. I told you I could talk for a couple of days about both the composer and the music, but this is mature Brahms, because Brahms finally published the set. I think he wrote it in 1887, and he finally published it in 1888, and he died in 1897. So it's literally just before the end of his life. And so he was in full power as a composer. I mean, he'd already written, the Requiem was written, 20 years before. And some of his greatest works, this was written even after the Fourth Symphony. And so Brahms has another set of pieces that a lot of people love are the Liebeslieder waltzes, and then the Neue Liebeslieder. So there's two sets, the regular set and then the new love song waltzes. People are very familiar with those because they're sung in English as well as German. But the harmonies and the rhythms are a little simpler, and they're really accessible. This set is much more sophisticated in terms of harmony. And so Brahms is one of those composers that you can be singing this incredible melody, and before you know it, you're going through 2 or 3 different keys. And that's the point he is as a composer in the set that we're singing is he's completely fluent harmonically, and he uses chromaticisms, or he uses just one key center throughout a whole piece if he wants a certain emotion. We have one piece where he uses 2 disjunct keys simultaneously in the same piece, and it's very, very jarring. It's you go along in one key, and then suddenly the piano, it's almost like they sort of go off the highway and go onto a washboard road, and you're really kind of taken aback. But so the harmonies, the rhythmic structure, everything is just a lot more sophisticated. But like Brahms in all his other music, they are beautiful tunes.
Yeah.
And every part in Brahms gets to sing a melody. Sometimes it's not just the soprano, but even the basses get to sing. The altos. Brahms loved the viola and the cello. And of course the alto is essentially is comparative to those stringed instruments, the rich lower strings, the basses and altos. And he gives prominence to those. But like all Germans, he can't get away from the tenors. And so the tenors are quite prominent, and they're featured in the few solos that he gives in the piece, as long as a couple of sopranos. And the soprano line could be, some of these pieces could just be published as solos. And in fact, there are 7 out of these pieces that Brahms did publish as solos, with vocal solos with piano accompaniment.
Interesting. All right. Well, and you had mentioned piano, and this is the first piece in our concert that does involve piano. Of course, our pianist Jaden Klein doing a wonderful job, and I mean the piano part in this is not to be put aside by any means. It's not that it is ever, but it's a substantial part. It's a substantial part of this work.
Yeah, much like Schubert, and then another well-known German writer of Lied, Schumann, it's almost like Brahms takes the aspects of both of them and kind of combines them in what he does. And so, yeah, the piano part is essentially another voice. It is an equal partner in these pieces. And there are some of the pieces in which some of the passage work or even the entire movement could be scored as just a piano piece. Could stand on its own. There are others where neither can the vocal part stand on its own, but neither the piano part can't either. It's like they don't exist separate from each other, and that's really Brahms's kind of magic, is putting the whole together. And so, yeah, she's our partner, and she's a fabulous pianist. And she's going to go on from Idaho State and work on a master's in piano performance and pedagogy at the University of Colorado in Boulder.
That's our second set. Is that whole work, the Zigeunerlieder. The third set starts off with Norman del Joio, a jubilant song, and boy is it ever. Again, this is another piece that is quite long, but I mean stands on its own as almost a separate movement to our little symphony here. What can you tell us about this piece?
Can't mention a jubilant song, Dello Joio's setting, without mentioning Walt Whitman, the poet. And the text is so significant because Whitman wrote an amazing amount of poetry in his life, and one of his greatest collections is called Leaves of Grass. And there is a rather large poem within this huge collection called A Song of Joys. And so Dello Joio was reading A Song of Joys, and he became obsessed with his text. And so essentially he took some of the text out of that poem and adapted it. And so Dello Joio was a 20th century composer, not quite to mid 20th century, but this piece was written and finished post World War II, like 1946-ish. So democracy was an issue then too. And so that all of that joy and jubilation and a song of life was striking to the composer. And Dello Joio's masterful setting, kind of like Pege in that 2025 Latin setting, he combines incredible rhythms, driving rhythms, short motives. He uses a 3-note theme at the beginning of the piece that the choir sings. Well, actually, the piano plays it first, and then the choir echoes it on the syllable O, like an expression of ho. And like Beethoven did, he expands this little germ into 8 minutes worth of music. Of course, he embellishes it and adds to it, and there are different kinds of melodic ideas, but it's just a wonder in and of itself. So through the music, we hear the meaning, at least in my opinion, we hear the meaning of Whitman's text. He brings it to life. And this is another piano part, because Jaden Klein plays a significant piano part in this piece, which any pianist should be rewarded in heaven for playing, because it's difficult. It's essentially adding exclamation points, punctuation, and then filling in ideas of its own to what the voices are talking about or singing about. For instance, the choir says and sings, we dance, we sing, we shout for joy, and then you hear this almost rodeo-like theme where violins are playing in fifths and fourths, echoed in the piano. And so it just is another partnership in between the vocal part and the piano. An important part, I almost forgot to say, is that the voice is sort of treated like an instrument. There are melodic moments, but unlike the Brahms, where everything is so singable, there are huge stretches of measures where, as you know, the low voices might have to sustain high range parts, or the low voices in the women's section do the same thing. The high voices sing even higher than normal. And these endless patterns are more like somebody would write for an orchestra, for wind instruments or for violins at times. So it's difficult. It's a difficult sing, not because the notes are particularly the hardest thing that any of the singers have had to wrap their heads around, but is so instrumental. And it's just, once the choir begins singing, it never stops. And it's relentless. And then in the middle of this relentless, these two A sections, if you want to call them that, two relentless sections, is this very reflective moment that Dello Joio sets very softly and subtly, where the soprano soloist sings, almost as if she's saying, let me say this a little bit differently, like a whisper, so that you really are listening. And then we go back into dancing and being joyful. So I wanted to mention that about how instrumental it is for the singers. And so it comes at the end. It comes toward the end of the concert. So it's almost sort of torture for from a vocal standpoint. I'm being facetious about that a little bit,
sure.
but it's
Sure.
Our program is not easy.
Rounding out the concert in that third set is a Moses Hogan arrangement of We Shall Walk Through the Valley in Peace. And like many of your concerts, in fact, maybe all of them, I don't know, you end with a spiritual. And to me, this feels like a different spiritual than I am used to you ending concerts with, at least in the past. And so maybe you could speak a little bit to why you end with the spiritual and how this one's maybe a little bit different, or what was it you were going for with this choice?
I think, first of all, the kind of divided the program up into three little mini sets, and it's real simple. The concept is, for the first section, songs of faith, because those songs were essentially Latin songs of worship, whether they were written in the 1500s or they were written just yesterday, whether they were written for the church or whether they were not. They use an ancient, essentially dead language, but it was always the church. And then our second grouping is the Brahms, and that's songs of love. Doesn't have to be explained. And then I think of the last set, which is the Dello Joio, a jubilant song, and the spiritual as songs of life. And for many of us, there are so many component parts to our lives. And it's not that, now I just am with my family, or with my faith, or with the hardships that I endure. I think that the Walt Whitman text beautifully captures the exuberant part of living. It also kind of is reflective. And then I like the spiritual genre because I think it's so unabashedly from the heart. Whether the songs were written by slaves in the field or in some other context, they seem to have within them or contain within them great passion. Whether the passion is joy, sadness, enslavement, yearning for freedom. And so often I've been drawn to those things that are sort of like a jubilant song in the Dello Joio, that are just unabashedly praise and the wonderful exaltation that we feel, whether we call it a church kind of divine or we call it the exuberance of life. I've been drawn to those. And there are times in our lives, I think, I've used this analogy before. I don't know if you were in a choir that heard this, but for me, it speaks for me because I've had this experience where I've sat on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And I have sat on that rim when the sun goes down. And the Grand Canyon is such an awesome space, miles and miles. It's impossible for your mind to comprehend how large that space is. And then the play of light on the cliffs that are on the other side, it's breathtaking. And when you sit there, and if you're lucky enough to be there after hours or you're somewhere that it doesn't have a lot of people, it's pretty silent. And there's just awesome is all I can think of. Overwhelming. You can't speak. And it's not loud. It's not demonstrative. It's not whooping and hollering. It is like this fundamental tone. And it's almost like the soul just kind of rests and you feel at ease. And that's what I feel when I heard this arrangement by Moses Hogan of the spiritual "We shall walk through the valley in peace." And it is such a masterful arrangement, I think, that the choir can evoke, if everything's lined up and everybody's on the same page, the choir can evoke such softness but such beauty that it's almost impossible to take. It's so beautiful that it's painful. It's hard to explain that, but that's how I feel as the conductor. I even in our rehearsal tonight, I was overwhelmed a couple of times because it was so beautiful. And then there is one moment when the arranger sets some very emotionally charged text. It's almost like when you say the same thing 3 different ways. And you've been saying it so quietly, and then suddenly you get frustrated that maybe people don't understand you. And you raise your hands and you stomp your feet. You say, "What I mean is..." I feel that in this arrangement, and so there's one part that the choir just goes for it. And then, where to me the divine comes in is when they transition back to the really soft singing. It's because it's impossible. What the arranger asks from the singers is impossible. But they do it. And to end on "We shall walk through the valley in peace," where Jesus himself will be our leader. We shall walk through the valley in peace. It's just so calming in a fundamental way. And like I said, it's one of the few pieces I've ever come across that's in that genre where I thought, well, my God, I could end a concert with this and nobody could say anything. They might not clap, but they would be changed. Sort of like what Handel said when somebody said after the Messiah performance, "Oh, what an incredible piece! That you made people changed." He said, "Oh, no, I don't wish to change them. I hope to make them better." That's a great line.
That is a good line.
And that's kind of how I feel about it. It's like after hearing it, after singing it, it just feels like we're better.
There will be
It's very unifying and such a wonderful exclamation point on a quite frankly a wonderful program that you put together. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really fortunate to have the kind of singers that have given their time and their talents over to being in the group.
Yeah. Well, we all appreciate it and are all better because of it, I think. I mean, it's just such a rewarding experience to be in this group. It really is. And not just memories. I mean, there's memories, sure, but, our lives are busy. Everyone's lives are busy. And to be able to take the time to make some beautiful music, it's beyond words. It's difficult to explain, frankly, but it's...
Well, no, I was saying earlier in the rehearsal that I said, we can all make music in various opportunities, but we all, the alumni and me, we all at specific moments in time, we experienced this, what we've been talking about, in other eras, in other years. And when you have those experiences, you never forget them. And in a way, you become tied to those people forever.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me and going through this literature.
For me blabbing.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I mean, such wonderful insight and look forward to the concert. The concert is Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Again, at the Jensen Concert Hall at the Stevens Performing Arts Center in Pocatello. Tickets are available at the door. Please join us. I think you'll have a wonderful time and hopefully a life-changing time as well.
Yes, and thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.